Jim Steinman's self-proclaimed "exorcism you can dance to" says it all. A growing snowball of Steinman's artistic endeavours and experiences from his late teens and early 20s. Total Eclipse of the Heart arrived more like an avalanche of creative ideas on the doorstep of the power station in 1982. The writer, producer, engineer, composer, let's honestly just call him a jack of all musical trades, was seemingly an unlikely pairing for the lead singer on the track, Bonnie Tyler. A country rock artist from the Welsh town of Mumbles, Tyler's charting success was, at the time, achieved through a completely different style of rock. Despite this difference, or perhaps because of it, Total Eclipse of the Heart became something else entirely. One of the first charting-powered ballads of the 80s rock in the UK, Steinman's creation took no shortcuts in the studio. No one's creative ideas were left untested. No rehearsals were rushed or cut short. And reportedly, no one reverb fader sat below 100%. So let's dive in and explore the magnum opus itself, Total Eclipse of the Heart.
I really need it tonight. Forever's gonna start tonight.
When CBS Records first heard the collaboration request for Jim Steinman, the label genuinely seemed to think Bonnie Tyler had lost it. She admits they never in a million years thought that this would come off. And to their credit, his experience and style didn't exactly align to Tyler's previous work. At the time, Steinman had played a major part in Meat Loaf albums, especially 1977's Bat Out of Hell, and particularly two mega hits found on the record, Paradise by the Dashboard Light and 2 Out of 3 Ain't Bad.
It never felt so good, it never felt so right.
His other credits ran parallel to this style of music, and at this point his name within the industry had become synonymous with hard rock, heavy rock, and even metal. Hence, he mirrored the record label's initial reaction to Tyler's request. I was a little bit surprised they would ask me. It was a real challenge because of that. I thought she had one of the most passionate voices I'd ever heard in rock and roll since Janis Joplin. When considering the likelihood of creating a commercial success, one might consider the odds to be stacked against the duo, given the juxtaposition of creative styles at play. Thankfully, Steinman already had a head start. Its original title was Vampires in Love, because I was working on a musical of Nosferatu, the other great vampire story. He also drew upon other previous works, like a college musical from his senior year at Amherst in Massachusetts. This collegiate project from 1969, one of the first creative endeavours of his adult career, would render one of the most prominent and iconic lines for Total Eclipse, "Turn around, brighter eyes." This culmination of dark creative endeavours almost found its way into the Meat Loaf record, Midnight at the Lost and Found. However, the two labels in play, Epic and Cleveland International Records, were unable to come to an arrangement with Steinman regarding the costs of producing the song. This financial disagreement on the Meat Loaf record opened up the track's availability, ultimately finding itself in the unlikely hands of CBS Records and Bonnie Tyler. Jim Steinman began production efforts in 1982. That summer, the audio engineering team got their first taste of working with the grandiose, Broadway-style visionary. Frank Filippetti, who was particularly responsible for recording and mixing the backing vocals on the track, recalls, "As far as I'm concerned, Jim is one of the greatest songwriters and producers of our era. He wasn't as interested in adhering to traditional ways of doing things. He was always looking for something a little different. He was more interested in the emotional arc that the song was taking rather than going by verse, chorus, bridge formula. In doing so, his music took you on a journey." Given this unconventional approach to the production process, it makes sense that Steinman's methodology for teaching the song was very hands-on. Tyler explains, "Jim never gave me a demo. I learned the entire song beside the piano as Jim played." Recording took place in Studio A at the Power Station in New York, with Jim Steinman leading the helm as producer. Audio engineers Neil Dorsman and John Jansen helped the producer steer the ship. According to Dorsman, the recording process for this chart-topping success had humble beginnings, as first seen on the setup for drummer Max Weinberg. "We didn't have a whole lot of esoteric microphones. It was pretty basic. Ambience recording wasn't a fine art then like it's become now, so it was pretty minimal. To capture the bigger drums, they placed an AKG D12 and Neumann U47 FET on the kick and positioned 421s both above and beneath the toms. In a similar manner, SM57s were used above and below the snare. The cymbals received AKG 451s on the hi-hat and overheads, and U87s for the rooms. Dorfman recalls that he might have additionally added an SM7 for the room as well. So let's check out Max's drums. I'm sure you know Max Weinberg from, of course, Bruce Springsteen and Conan O'Brien. An amazing drummer. Obviously some sound effects in that drum track. Sleigh bells? Big explosions? I mean, it's total Eclipse of the Heart. Let's go back to earlier in the track. I mean, there's probably some ambience mics in there, but that's reverb. That sounds like a lexicon to me, if ever there was one. Although I do know that when we were in the power station, they would open up the doors and then mic the stairwell as well. So it could be stairwell, U87s in the room, and a schnizzle ton of lexicon reverbs. Love those percussive elements. And there's a ton of attack. Like it's really, this is pre-transient designers, but you can tell they've got the slow attack on the compressor, but also with a lot of compression. So that really pokes its head through and makes it really cut in the track. Awesome. And very 80s with the hat and the overheads. Like the hat is there's no like thick body in like you hear now on modern recordings. It's very, very processed in a good way. You know, big kick, big snare, thin sounding hat, overheads that are a little thinner, but just like designed for a dense production that this song truly is. So let's check out Steve Buslow's bass track. If he wasn't just driving that last section there with Bonnie's vocal, let's put in her vocal, and he was filling it, it would just completely take away from the power of it. Sometimes the right thing to play is the obvious thing, and I think a lot of that is the most obvious thing. And that's quite a skill. A lot of people don't play the obvious. They always just try to show off. Here he is supporting and driving the song.
Like a shadow on me all of the time. All the time. I don't know.
Queen part there, it's just absolutely fantastic. Total Jim Steinman genius. But yeah, the bass line frames the chords, holds it down, drives, it's tight with the drums. That's an art in itself. It doesn't always have to be, you know, all over the place. Just playing the right thing is an art to itself. Just ask the great bass players. Roy Bittan was recorded in the piano booth on a Yamaha with two AKG 451s in close proximity to the instrument. So let's check out his piano track, which is a pretty important part of this song. reading that it was 451s makes perfect sense because it doesn't have quite the body of a large diaphragm. And it's all about the attack. And there's some crazy compression going on to exaggerate that. I think that's what makes it better. I think if you put some large diaphragms on the piano, you might end up with a bit too much body. And it's probably hyped with EQ as well. Everything on this feels hyped with EQ. But listen to the aggression and how it's been brought out by those microphones, and most importantly, by Roy Bittan's performance. Absolutely superb. It's all about the energy, but I do love the fact that they use small diaphragms. It really makes me think, if I want a more aggressive piano track, maybe to use small diaphragms so it exaggerates some of that attack, not quite so much body. I do find, like many of us, that fitting pianos into dense tracks, you end up wiping off a lot of low mids and a lot of low end. Maybe just using a small diaphragm will take care of that for you. Now, Rick Derringer was brought in for the guitar part. Derringer was, especially at the time, known for writing and producing the Billboard chart-topping rock and roll Hoochie Coochie for Johnny Winter in 1970. According to Dorsman, the guitar track was an overdub. So let's check out the guitar track. Now, listening to music in solo is pretty devastating because you start hearing like where he's digging in and playing aggressively. It goes a little sharp here and there. And I do these things and people say, oh, that was out of tune, or the vocal was, and I don't disagree, but it adds to the energy. If I throw in the bass and the keys and the guitar, sit all together. Who has heard this song, though, and thought, oh, it's out of tune? None of us. Absolutely none of us. Throw in the vocals.
Together we can take it to the end of the line. Your love is like a shadow on me.
But we don't listen to music in solo. I love that part. There's a little chorusing on it. It's got a lot of width to it. It's got a lot of verb on it. It's absolutely phenomenal. And Rick Derringer is a wonderful, wonderful guitar player. Larry Fast and Steve Margoshes were responsible for the synth parts, which were notably used to create those cannon sounds found in the track. That's what we heard in those drums. We were hearing those explosions. Those were cannon tracks from a synth. Like the guitar, Dorsman recalls that the synths were overdubs. You know, as soon as a drummer brings in sleigh bells and holds them up as a potential percussion idea, most of us just go, no, it's not a Christmas track. And this is not a Christmas track. It's a big song. I'm sure it's been a hit in many countries during Christmas, but it's not a Christmas song. But those sleigh bells really drive it along, and those cannons sound fantastic. So yeah, the synth solo is essentially just mirroring the melody with the R's here. Take out the R's. Sounds like a Moog bass pedal or something as well in there, because that's not the bass guitar in there. That's a separate track. It's the melody. The synth solo is the melody. It's a super hooky melody. When it comes to the vocals, Steinman leveraged an unheard, gritty side of Tyler's voice, leveling listeners with a powerful vocal delivery by the artist. In 1976, Tyler had undergone surgery on a larynx, developing a completely different voice after the months-long recovery process. While the singer's voice retained some of its original characteristics on her post-surgery records, Steinman fully dove into a newfound grit for Total Eclipse. Vocal recordings were cut in 2 locations. Bonnie Tyler's leads and Rory Dodd's backups were captured in separate ISO booths at the power station. Dorfman confidently boils down the recording gear to either U67s, Telefunken 251s, or some combination of those 2 microphone models. The other vocal sessions took place at Right Track in New York. Frank Filippetti, who ran Point, recorded Rory Dodd, Eric Troyer, and Holly Sherwood. The team at this location ended up capturing what would be the majority of backing vocal takes for the entire project. Filippetti explained that the vocalist would sing a vocal line for the chorus, perhaps a harmony part. Then they would double them doing the same line again. They would sing the next step in a harmonic sequence, and they would probably do the tonic note first, then the third, then the fifth, and we'd double each of those. Then we'd probably add an octave over the original, and they would vary somewhat. But that was the basic idea. Then we would go back and do the same thing, but this time Eric and Rory would sing in harmony instead of in unison. And then we did the double. They would switch the parts, so if Rory was on the top and Eric was on the bottom of the first pass, Rory would be on the bottom and Eric would be on the top on the second pass, and then we'd do the whole thing that way. At the time of recording, Right Track Studios sported an SSL 4000 console. It was further armed with EQP and MEQ Pultecs, the Massenburg EQ, TubeTech 1A, at least 2 EMT plates for reverb, URI 1176s, LA2As, and a bathroom or 2 that we would occasionally throw vocals in and use as a chamber. While Filippetti is slightly less sure about the mics, he remembers that AKG C12s and Neumann 269s were the norm for the location. Altogether, Dorfman deduced that between the power station and Right Track Studios locations, the 2 teams collectively captured 20 takes of the track. The end result best expressed in Filippetti's acclamation of the song, a vocal tour de force. Let's check out the vocals. I know we've been playing bits of it, but let's see if we can just listen. Take it from the top.
Turn around. Every now and then I get a little bit lonely and you never...
I mean, it's hard not to see Rory Dodd's vocals as almost a twin lead there, even though they definitely have less personality. An incredible singer, but just a turn around, very almost emotionless. By being emotionless in that first part, it sets off Bonnie's voice incredibly well. That rip in her vocals and the fact that, she'd had surgery on her voice really kind of adds up and gives it even more emotion. Even though Rory has the big line, turn around, bright eyes, I think it's that juxtaposition between the 2 very, very different voices. And then when these harmonies come in.
Turn around. Every now and then I get a little bit restless and I dream.
I love that you can hear the bleed through the wall. I've done this so many times myself, where you've got like vocal booths next to the control room and you are cranking it in the control room, loving it. So they're probably like cranking it so loud through the mains, like digging it, listening to the BVs layering it. And of course, there's that low end rumble coming through into the mic, which doesn't mean much when it's one vocal. But when it becomes like, 4, 6, 8 vocal passes, that starts to add up.
Every now and then I fall apart.
I mean, I can imagine there was hundreds of people bawling their eyes out going through breakups to this song. So is this a precursor to the modern trendy production, which is to have a huge verse and pre-chorus section and then boom, the completely blank chorus? So when this hits here, let's have a look. We are with the keys intro. We're 2 minutes and 44 seconds in before you hear that second full rendition of the chorus. 2 minutes and 44 seconds in. And you don't hear it again until the end of the song, which is 5 minutes and 20 seconds. And it only happens one more time at the end. Now it's doubled in length. But if that really is the chorus, it takes 2 minutes and 44 seconds to come in, and then you don't hear it again until 5:20. I mean, it's a testament to incredible songwriting, amazing production, wonderful performances. I mean, the twin lead vocal kind of sound is huge between Rory and Tyler. Absolutely massive. So for the mix, the multi-day back-to-backs mix sessions took place in Studio C at the power station. Then they moved to Studio B and it's 8068. They were attempting to at least match the bar of the initial rough mix created in Studio A, a task they were struggling to achieve in Studio C. Upon hearing the final recording, the usual reaction of the engineers and musicians was some form of gleeful shock. Dorsman characterized his experiences in detail. I remember very clearly the first time they ran Total Eclipse of the Heart down, turning to Jim and saying, "This is going to be the biggest song you've ever recorded." I knew it halfway through the recording. I thought it was quite brilliantly put together. I mean, it's super cartoonish with the explosions and synth solo, a very iconic Jim Steinman production. More is better, more of everything is better, but I just knew from the structure of it, I just knew, and I was right. Steinman and his decisions are a perfect case study of someone in the midst of their breakout period as a producer. The vision was lofty, and the hour count on multiple sessions frequently reached double digits. However, he seemed to strike the necessary balance between giving enough hands-on direction, the kind needed to convey his complicated vision to others, and allowing the other professionals to achieve it by their own means. Filippetti recounts his experience with the producer as someone who kept a collaborative, peer-to-peer attitude and often stayed late. Also, it didn't hurt that he frequently ordered great food for the team, especially after long sessions. Jim really treated everyone first class, so it made all the hard work something you wanted to do. Though his ideas were large and arguably new to the artists involved, Steinman crafted a mundane, realistic approach for achieving the behind-the-scenes work. And, as multiple people on the project have expressed, this is likely why they followed him into the fire. Total Eclipse hit number 1 in the US on October 1st, 1983, where it stayed for 3 weeks. The same year, it reached the number 1 position in Canada, New Zealand, Norway, and South Africa. In addition to charting success, the song racked up impressive sales numbers, going gold in Portugal, Germany, and France, and platinum in the United States, the UK, Italy, Denmark, and Canada. In Australia, Total Eclipse went 4 times platinum. This was a huge song. I mean, that's an understatement of the decade. And this Welsh singer was well loved at the time. And the fact that she'd had a career a number of years before wasn't so much like a comeback song, but it was definitely something everybody was rooting for. And this was at a time when regular TV was so important. And you would see her on daytime TV shows performing this regularly. And it was just a massive song. We all knew it had a Meatloaf connotation. You could tell just by listening that it was the same guy that had worked on Meatloaf albums and written those huge, huge songs. But it was more than that. Even though it had that production value that Jim Steinman brought to everything, and that songwriting, most importantly, I think it was that dual lead. It was the fact that there was this sort of, mundane, ordinary kind of delivery that set off her raspy, emotional voice that really makes it huge. And then, of course, Rory gets into those incredible background vocals as well. Bonnie Tyler has an amazing voice, but Jim Steinman's incredible production and songwriting helped set it off, and it became a worthy contender for one of the best songs of the 80s. Definitely exemplifies the better things of the 80s. Unusual songwriting, huge production that isn't bloated. It just supports a powerful, incredibly well-written song. Could be one of the best examples of 80s productions. Thank you everybody for watching. Please leave some comments and questions below. Let us know what other songs you want us to cover in the series. Thanks ever so much for watching. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, au revoir, adios, tschüss, ciao, tutsins, goodbye.